today's Chronicle, or the op-ed. It's at the back of, I guess, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, and back of Obama. And behind the Prince's back, he has 9/11, right? 9/11 report. And on the back of Obama says the last 8 years.
Huh, okay.
So he's been covering up the Saudi role in 9/11 for the last 8 years.
Mm-hmm. And that's in the Houston Chronicle.
Yep.
Right. Wow.
Well, the Chronicle's also carried almost all of the New York Times articles about the Saudis.
Uh-huh.
We're live.
Okay, good. Well, and then I'll repeat that then, since we're just starting. For those who are here in the room today, thanks for joining us. And we have an audience online here as well, listening in. I'm Keisha Rogers, and we're going to have a special guest today. Her name is Liona Fan-Chiang, and she works with our science team, known as the LaRouche Back Basement team. So we were just discussing here, and I'll go through a few of the updates. One of the participants was discussing the fact that there is a editorial, an op-ed cartoon in the Houston Chronicle today, which shows the Saudi king and President Obama in a cartoon where the Saudi king is hiding the 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission report behind his back, and Obama is there, and behind Obama's back it says the last 8 years, meaning that he's been hiding the reports and the classified documents of the 28 pages for the last 8 years. I mean, very significant. And I think this, shows that right now the dam is breaking around this president and his treasonous acts and criminal activity. And there's a lot that we can go through. I just want to point out a few things to you, because what I'm going to say is really going to segue into why we're having this discussion today, because I don't want you to leave here thinking you had a nice discussion on science and space, because that's not what we're here for. The problem with what we're really facing right now is a question of, can we organize a renaissance and define a new meaning for mankind in the midst of this egregious attacks on the perspective of who we are as human beings? Right now we're at the total brink of war, of thermonuclear war. You have the fact that for the past 2 administrations under the Bush-Cheney-Obama administration, it's been a downward spiral of total collapse, total treason, and degeneracy. And now this is coming to a head. And if people have seen in the recent reports of what has now transpired from the standpoint of what LaRouche has been exposing and warning, Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, who has the authority going back for decades, talking about and exposing the intention and the role of the British Empire and their stooges, like President Obama and President Bush and so forth, to carry out a policy of total destruction and war. Now, what's happened is that there is a total move to break with that policy and to expose it for the crime that it is. And this has been something that we've been right at the forefront of. I know that many people know and have seen the fight being led by Mr. LaRouche and our organization for years, a few years now, going back to 2002, 2003, after the attacks on the trade towers and the attacks on the United States in 9/11, 2001, September 11, 2001. And one thing that has now come out is that there is a massive call being initiated for the release of these classified 28 pages that were classified under President Bush and Vice President Cheney, and can remain classified under President Obama, which gets to the core of the Saudi-British alliance and the funding behind 9/11. There's the recent developments. You've had the 60-minute segment on calling for the release of the 28 pages. There's been an enormous increase in the numbers of representatives in the U.S. Congress who've signed on to House Resolution 14, and which is calling for the release of the 28 pages. And prior to the recent trips of President Obama, where many people know and have seen the pretty insane reports of his trips to Saudi Arabia and to London just in the last 48 hours, that he was not hiding his intentions at all. His remarks blatantly show that he has no intentions to break the special relationship and the commitment to the Saudis and to the Queen. As a matter of fact, while he's visiting the Queen for her 90th birthday, he talks about, and this is reported in the Guardian, the London Guardian. Obama's reporting, he said that he had a staff member who wanted to meet with the Queen, and that, you know, she wanted to have a chance to meet, and the Queen usually doesn't meet with his staff. And so anyway, you know, she almost fainted when she had an opportunity to meet with the Queen. Now, okay, you think that's something. And, you know, he goes on to say that this is Obama's, and that special relationship is going to impact, nothing is going to impact that. It is solid, and it will continue, and hopefully eternally. And then he goes on, and that same the same report later talks about how the president expressed his dislike for Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and said that I can't even call him president. You know, I can't even refer to him by that name. I mean, and talking about a degeneracy in culture, he later on says, you know, he had to make remarks on the death of the pop entertainer Prince, and I love Prince. You know, but this is what we're dealing with right now. You know, you have a president who is completely insane from the standpoint that the intention has been clearly shown that we're at a point right now where there has to be a decision by the population, there has to be a decision by mankind. Are we going to actually reverse this trend of cultural degeneracy, economic collapse, and move toward a new renaissance? Or are we going to continue the policy that's driving the nation and the world toward utter destruction and war? And this is, for those of you who talk to us on the phone, or, you know, you see us on the streets organizing, and you're trying to get a sense of what this movement, what LaRouche actually represents, and what our intention has been. You know, the identity of this organization for the past 40-something, 50 years has not been on the idea of we're going to push a piece of legislation through, or we want to get rid of a political candidate or that political candidate, or put this political candidate in. It's actually been on this question of identifying the true conception of the human creative mind. What are human beings? What is the purpose of human beings to foster a new direction for a renaissance that betters the relationship of mankind to the universe and to the solar system in which we live? And I mean, it's something, this idea that when you when you come to find an organization that is actually saying, okay, how do we get people to see themselves in a different light as human beings? Then, you know, what that requires is a complete transformation of the way we think about ourselves. And right now, we have to realize that the way that the empire thinks about human beings is that they're nothing but beasts and animals, and that we can't make discoveries that's going to improve and increase the progress of who we are as, you know, as species, creative species. And so that's why this past, I would say, in the course of the last several months, you know, we've had a shift that's been rapidly growing from the standpoint of nations saying we want to take up this new direction for, you know, what mankind truly should represent. China, Russia, India, and many other nations who are joining with this effort are saying we need to create a new paradigm for mankind. We don't want this war threat anymore. We don't want this financial, we don't want the financial speculation and control over our nations. We want sovereign nations to emerge, and that nations are going to actually define in each other what is the best culture of all nations. We're looking for the best in every single person, in every single human being. And that was exactly what was the essence of the theme that was initiated by the conference held by the Schiller Institute on April 7th. I'm just going to make the point that if people haven't had a chance to watch this conference, you can find it on the LaRouche website, and you can also find it on the Schiller Institute website, called Building a New World Land Bridge, Realizing Mankind's True Humanity. And the conference had a perspective in the first panel where there were many participants representing different nations, including Mrs. LaRouche, on the question of how we come together on building the development of a world land bridge, a new Silk Road policy that's going to unite nations around the highest increase in scientific, technological developments, including high-speed rail systems and so forth, that's going to increase the productivity of all nations. And the second panel was on new frontiers and new scientific frontiers, which I was the speaker on that panel, one of the speakers on the panel there. And I think that's really what we want to actually take today, what Leona is going to continue on in terms of the new frontiers that we have to embark on require a new commitment for mankind in space. And many of people know that I've been leading the campaign for the past 10 years now, calling calling for the reigniting of our commitment and our mission to space exploration, especially after in 2010, President Obama made the egregious attacks on the space program, shutting down the manned mission Constellation program. And the reality is that this wasn't just a budget decision or something that was a unintentional cut. It was very much intentional, and it got deeper to the root of what we're dealing with in terms of the fact that we're dealing with a presidency and with a system that says that human beings and the nation does not deserve a future. And we've been seeing that. The escalation toward the death threats, the escalation around the collapse of the degeneracy in the culture around the numbers of people committing suicide today, the numbers of people who are dying from drug overdoses. This is a result of a society that has denied its nation, and especially the younger people, a future to be able to be productive citizens. And so that's why we're having this discussion today, because what Leona is going to go through and what we've been talking about and really fighting with the scientific community around those people who were organizing in the space program around the commitment and the vision of John F. Kennedy, is that we have to restore that type of commitment again. We actually have to have a new identity about, our commitment to space from the standpoint of creating new frontiers, creating a new understanding of how we're going to improve on the economic progress of our nation and of the world. And the best way to do it, the best means to do that, is through the exploration of space, particularly human exploration of space. So that is what Leona's going to talk about. And, we got a taste of just how important this is and the direction that we can go in the recent period when we just had the developments of the 1 year in space by astronaut Scott Kelly and his counterpart, the Russian cosmonaut Misha, who spent almost a year in space, and they have really defined the next steps in terms of the research needed to understand what are the physical limitations and capabilities that allow for mankind to go further out into space, and what more do we need to learn. And the problem is, if we shut down those capabilities, we limit ourselves in terms of our ability to define what it is that is our relationship as human beings to the world beyond, to the solar system beyond, and that is our mission. So if people didn't see this, there's actually an interesting article, a whole report in the Time, a year in space inside Scott Kelly's historic mission is travel to Mars next, but I think it indicates where we have to go, that we're a long way away from getting there, and the question should be, what is it going to take for mankind to realize this true potential? And that's what we're fighting for. That's the mission right now, for restoring our commitment to a national mission for space exploration, and that is the commitment which really gets us into a unified conception of having a new idea of where we can take the nation and bring the nation forward in terms of what we represent for the world and what we could represent for the world. And you'll see, as in the discussion, that there are other nations right now who are already taking those steps. So with that, I want to ask Leona to come up, and we will have some more discussions. Any questions you want to ask me afterwards, we'll do that.
Hello, my name is Leona. I want to discuss this. And has everybody read this? Who has not read this?
The whole thing? No, not the whole thing.
What is it?
So this is, the United States joins the new Silk Road, a Hamiltonian vision for an economic renaissance. And people who have been following or talking to LaRouche people or following news sources that are not U.S., you know that there is a huge shift going on in the world. There are more than, 70% of the population is doing something else than what has been the leading trend for the past at least 40 years. And specifically what I'm talking about is initiative really largely by China, some by Russia, around changing the laws, changing the rules of the game. The idea is no longer if I get something, then you get less. No, it's the opposite. If I get something, you get something out of this too. And this is something that the president of China has called the win-win paradigm. And this paradigm has already begun. And if you look at the developments around China, it's amazing. They built 7,000 miles of high-speed rail, since 2007. I mean, think about this. Think about since 2007 till now, and all the developments that have happened in the U.S. And compare that to 7,000 miles of high-speed rail. We have none, you know that. You know that. It's even worse around here, but there's none in the U.S. They're on their way to graduating 2,000 fusion scientists, and so on. It's just incredible the amount of advance that has happened even since 2007. They now have, and this is all part of an integrated plan that they have for for development across the Eurasian continent, the entire, you should call it continent, right? Yeah. And what I want to point out about that is that they have really led the way toward the direction that Lyndon and Helga LaRouche have discussed for a few decades now. And they have now, they're showing the shadows of a principle which we've been discussing for quite a long time. Now, the principle is the fight for the identity of humans, of humankind. Right? It's not just, okay, yes, they're building all these different things. No, the question is, can human beings grow up? Can we get out of adolescence? Can we finally discover what human beings are? And I really like this. Not that. This is a quote. I cannot imagine a more foreboding, apocalyptic vision than the future of a mankind endowed with cosmic powers, but condemned to solitary confinement on a single planet. And this is by a German-American space pioneer. Because I want you to see this. Now, you know, you see in the news, China's building all these different things. But really, nobody in public discusses the new paradigm as we've discussed it in this light, which is a complete revolution and evolution of human beings. It's not just raising the standard of living, you know, giving people food, but really trying to figure out, okay, well, what is unique about mankind such that we do these things? Why do we do these things? What does it mean to progress? And this is why one, you know, part of the, oh, how about this? Let's take it this way. If we were just trying to feed everyone, right? If we were just trying to feed the population and bring everybody back up to high standards of living, then we would not, first of all, it wouldn't work. But second of all, there would be no fusion and space program, I think. And the ultimate consequence is that we would not be able to feed everybody. But, so I want to bring up okay, so the space program. The space program, like I said, it's an integrated part of what China's doing. It was an integrated part of what the US is doing as a basic declaration of an intent for the nation. And the other stuff is sort of just maintenance. The other stuff like building infrastructure and so on is sort of, it's a maintenance of your ability to survive. but what is the progress of the species as a whole? And this is really where the space program comes in. Right? It defines, okay, well, how do we rediscover ourselves? The near-term things are obviously, okay, yes. You know, we have better people, we have better technology, you have better training. Here, I've seen so many industries that were or are now being supported in some way by the space program. The entire medical field and machine shops and so on are somehow integrated, and you find that we cannot be unaffected by that advance. But really, those near-term goals, those near-term things are all still shadows. And the way I want to get at what that means is I want to go into what China's actually doing. Only a small aspect of it. Because if I were going to go through all of it, it actually would take a really long time. But I'm just going to go through a very small aspect of it, which is their lunar program. And okay, can you see that? No. Okay, yes. This is their lunar program in a small nutshell. So they have 3 phases of their lunar program, which started much earlier, but this aspect of it, which is the rover program, started in 2007. And it's very methodical. They did one orbiter, sent up an orbiter, they imaged it. Actually, I think I have, right, so I'll go through. So we're gonna go through the first phase right now, okay? I'll take you through the 3 phases they have. The first phase, they sent up an orbiter. It took images and sort of scoped the place out. They sent up another one right after that prospected for where to land something else. After they were done with that, they no longer needed the orbiter, so they sent it out to outer space and passed by an asteroid. This is one of the images they took. This is the asteroid images they took, which was very unique. And now it's it joins the 3 other things that are out there in past our solar system. Okay, it's the second phase. This one just happened in 2013. So this is the first soft landing on the moon since 1971. 76. Apollo 17. And so they landed a rover on there. I mean, they landed a lander and a rover. And it took this image. The lander took this image, which is of the Earth. This is the radiation belt of the Earth in UV. Okay. The next thing they did was they sent up a capsule that went around the moon and back. And this is to show, this is the first thing that they sent and that came back to Earth. So that's it right there. And that's to show that, 1, we can get back, but 2, that they're gonna, it's a preparation for the next phase, which is to return samples from the moon. That was the preparation one. This next one is the actual return sample. The sample return will happen next year. That was phase 3. I skipped over the other one because that's how they did it. Phase 2. Sorry, phase 2. Now let me just back up really quick. The Chinese are very methodical. Okay. They have a replica. They have an exact replica of everything they send up, just in case the thing they're sending up blows up. So that within minutes they can launch the second one, or not within minutes, but very soon they can launch a second one. so that the mission is not compromised because there are certain windows and so on. But but their mission, their process has been so smooth that they have been able to take that second replica and modify it for something else. So the replica of the lander that landed on the moon in 2013, they refitted it and are now landing on the far side. I want to show you this. The lunar far side. Okay, so this is every landing we've ever had on the moon. Okay.
So how many total is that, like 20?
This one says, yes, 20. So this is the last one.
What's the different colors?
The yellow one, yeah, it's on 3.
What are the different colors?
Those are different countries.
Different countries.
Right, and so
So we're the blue.
so
So
we're the
like
Apollos.
Who are the surveyors?
Russians.
No, I think the Lunas are the Russians.
So the light blue is what country?
That's US.
Oh, US is all of Holland, right, okay.
Now, the only thing I want to point out here is that all of the landings have been on the close side of the moon. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but the Earth always sees only one side of the moon. The moon is what they call tidally locked. There's a face that faces us all the time, and there's a face that we've never seen before from Earth. And it's described as more craggy, and we've seen it in pictures and so on. This will be the first time China's landing on that side will be the first time that human beings have landed on that side.
So, when you discuss samples, I know one of them's helium-3, correct?
Yeah.
Is it what? Any other samples that they're looking for?
Yeah, well, we want to bring one. We want to just figure out what's there, because yeah. So that's one thing. It's just figuring out what's there. For example, they recently re-examined samples that we got from the last mission, Apollo 17, 72, that they just re-examined that and found that you could detect a supernova explosion, that the samples had sort of locked in itself. So in that sense, there's a history to be told from the moon that is hard to tell on Earth because things change so much. On Earth, things just, there's life and oxygen. And so on Earth, things change a lot over, say, a couple of million years. But they don't change that much on the moon. And so there's a history to be told on there. But yes, the other aspect is what you're saying is we mine the moon. We will mine the moon for resources if we're going to seriously be out there. We're not going to ship everything from Earth. And so yes, helium-3 would be a major important part of it for fusion power. But we need other things. We need oxygen. We need nitrogen. We need basic metals, and so on. We have to figure out if those are there. Okay, the other aspect about the uniqueness of them landing on this far side is that, I should have had an image for this, but the far side is, like I said, it's facing away from Earth. Now, people have seen that image from the backside of the moon at Earth, the Earth rising image. This is famous Apollo image, and now they've taken it a bunch of times. But the Earth is actually very bright. It's a very bright planet. It's bright in a few different parts of the spectrum. And specifically, it's bright in low frequencies. And what we do, so the other side of the moon is Earth, here's the moon. The other side of the moon is actually shielded from Earth. So it's considered, it really is in that sense, a dark side of the moon. So they're going to put, the lander will basically be a little observatory that can see things we've never seen before. I'm not going to go through this because it's actually going to go. And I want to show you an example, okay? So this is a supernova remnant. So this is the leftovers of a supernova. And it's taken in by a satellite, a space telescope. This is that same remnant in the visible.
In the visible domain.
In the visible domain.
What was the other one?
X-ray.
Oh, okay.
Well, where are those pictures of the same area?
It's the same area. So you had your telescope there, and you had your telescope pointing at it, and you just had your, you turned it on your X-ray viewing capability, you took it off. This is what you'd see.
Mm-hmm.
So all those other stars are not visible because they're not emitting X-rays, and this one is just taking up the whole view.
It could be that the dim, it's rather dim, but yeah. So this is what you would see if you had a telescope pointing at it. So I just want to show you one example of a universe that's out there that emit at different frequencies. There'll be whole things that exist out there that emit in different frequencies, and we don't know about them.
So that's not a zoomed in view on one particular star.
Nope, that's the same exact place.
Same place, what, that thing?
Yeah, that thing is sitting right here. Don't you see it?
Yeah. That big green.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a picture that's recording, the other one is, because it looks like plants, like algae growing on a planet.
Well, see, we didn't see this until we put this satellite up there, this observatory up there.
It's pretty. Wow.
And there are tons of things we don't see. This image, which I didn't want to get into too much, is actually what we do see from Earth. So what we do see are visible frequencies and this radio section. But all these things are things that we don't see because our atmosphere blocks it. All these areas here. So we've sent up satellites just to view those areas. The one that from before was this satellite right here. And there's this whole region that's still untouched, which is what we're getting into now. So I just want to emphasize that besides the practical aspect, I don't know if you call it practical, but besides just getting out there and sort of being curious, there is a fundamental understanding of where we are in the universe that we don't have. And it just takes development, but we don't really know where we are. It's like you're floating in the middle of an ocean, and you don't know what ocean you're in. You don't know that there's a tornado happening just down the way, and that's why you're bobbing up and down or anything like that. You're just sort of subject to the wind at any one point. Okay, and then this is the last thing I want to go through with this. This is the logo of the Chinese lunar program. Can people see what that is?
What is it? Footprints? Are those footprints?
Yeah, they're
Okay,
footprints.
yeah.
The little astronaut footprints.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So that should tell you a little bit about what they're actually intending here with this whole program. Okay, so how do I look at this? Okay. Let me turn on the lights. So the most important part of that, this whole, like I said, going on the far side of the moon is going to be the first, it's actually going to be the first thing that China does that's very unique to all of mankind history. The other things, you could sort of argue we've done that before, but this is, no, we've never done this before. No one has ever done this before. And probably the most significant thing is not only that we've never done it before, but it goes closer toward what Mr. LaRouche has been saying has been emphasizing as that it goes closer towards our ability to discover who we actually are, what human beings really actually are. And, there's all sorts of weird philosophies out there about where the future is going to be. Is it going to be an AI? Are robots going to take over and things like that?
Be like the Jetsons.
Yeah, are we going to be like the Jetsons, or are we going to be totally emotionless, or whatever? There are all sorts of philosophies about what we are, and what we're going to be, and the key thing is that it's very difficult because we are never stationary. The human species is not a thing, like it's not a butterfly or an elephant, or an animal that you can describe and you can list all its properties. It's here's its lifespan and this is what it eats and so on. There's no animal called human. Right? The human species changes, and if you were to mark it down in 10 years, it would be different. In 50 years, it'd be different. You would almost be like it's a different, animal after that, after 50 years. Like us compared to before electricity or before petroleum or something like that. Totally different species. Lifespan went from 30 to 50 years to 100 years or 108. The species actually changes. And were we more conscious about that, we could guide that change toward what Kraft-Derricka was saying, a cosmic species. That we're actually endowed with the capability to be cosmic. That's a characteristic of the species. And that gives us a big responsibility. It defines then what we should be doing. You start from that standpoint, right? You start from, okay, well, elephants have big long noses, and so they therefore suck water up and do whatever they do. Okay, well, humans, their unique characteristic is that we rediscover ourselves all the time. We discover new principles of the universe. We apply them, become a new species because we are now more powerful in the universe, and then rediscover ourselves constantly. This is a constant process. So it's a process of evolution. And really, this is what the new paradigm is. It's restarting up that process of evolution that is unique and also inherent, natural for the human species. You start with that. Can you turn off the lights? Okay, so the space pioneer I mentioned earlier, Kraft-Derricka, he put out 3 laws of astronautics. Can somebody read them?
I'll read the first one. Nobody and nothing under the natural laws of this universe can impose any limitations on man except man himself.
It's the first law.
Not only the Earth, but the entire solar system and as much of the universe as he can reach under the laws of nature are man's rightful field of activity.
By expanding throughout the universe, man fulfills his destiny as an element of the endowed with without reason and wisdom of the moral law within himself.
As an element of life.
Oh, an element of life.
Yeah. So he's an element of life, but not just life. Endowed with the power of reason and wisdom of the moral law within himself.
Huh.
So I'll leave that up for a second. Okay, now these are the laws that we're going to use to create a space program, to limit a space program.
Or unlimited.
Yeah, exactly. These are your boundaries. Now, starting from there, what do you do? What are your steps to define where you should go in space, or what you should do next? And we recently put out a memo, which will be accessible in some way soon. What are you getting?
The memo, if you want to say what it says.
Oh,
Or you don't have to go through everything to say if you needed that.
no, it will be on the LaRouche Pack website. I'm sure all of you will get it. Okay. We recently put out a memo, which goes through some basic steps of, you can turn on the light, yeah, of where we might go from here. You know, not every step is going to be definable, which is good. We will discover things along the way. Where we want to go from here is, one of the obvious things is we want to go to the moon. Why? Well, the moon actually is a very good place to test everything that you're going to do everywhere else and still be close enough to come back. So one of I'll just read a couple of things that are in that memo. One is we want to be able to get to space, and so there's a bunch of different things we've outlined in there, which are close technologies that we can use to get to space. We want to be able to live in space, meaning we have to do the mining. We're going to mine helium-3 for power. We're going to have to mine for all the elements of life. Basically, we'll have to get from somewhere else. And perhaps the first stage will all be bringing from Earth. But the second stage will be a less energy-intensive mode of mining from somewhere else, or mining from the place you're going to be at. And then 3 is the very closely connected advancement in fusion power. So I don't think I want to go through all of that right now. What I do want to go through is something that Mr. LaRouche wrote in the 80s. What's that? 86. In 86, yeah. In 86, Mr. LaRouche wrote actually several different things. One of them was this, which is called The Science and Technology to Colonize Mars. So this is in 86, you know. And he outlines in here what most people in the space community actually know, which is that if you're going to have a serious space development program, you have to develop infrastructure like you do developing anywhere else. You know, you don't send a Donner Party out and you know what happened to them. You know, it's not like that. You have to develop a whole region to support people. And like, for example, you know how everybody is connected to their GPS system? Yeah, to get anywhere? Well, we don't have something like that for space. We don't have something like that for the moon. We don't have a solar system positioning system, right? Which we could have, and we're sort of, we need to have something like that. We don't have a train system throughout the solar system. We have more like a horse and buggy right now that sometimes makes it, and only half that time makes it back. You know, there's just basic. There's no gas stations out there, but there could be. We don't even have a dock out there. Now, the closest thing we do have, though, which we can make into something like a dock, is the space station. Yeah. So I don't know how many people know that there's a space station out there floating around. Okay. How big do you think it is?
I heard
The size of this room?
I heard that
The big Walmart.
the solar panels on it
Yeah.
are something like a football field.
Yeah. So the whole thing, long ways and this way, is about the size of a football field.
Oh,
That's pretty big.
You know, it's not filled out. It's like a big T, and it has these solar panels on it. So we have a giant floating living space going around the Earth every maybe 2 minutes,
That's what the
90
guy spent a
90
year in.
minutes.
Is it always occupied by people, or is it?
It's been consistently occupied by people
Wow.
for about 6 people, 6 to 7 people each time. That is a perfect place to start construction and to start launching from. So it'd be a little port, which is something that these space pioneers definitely had imagined. It was not an end. It was a beginning. You would get there, and then you would be halfway to anywhere else. That's an example.
Can you tell us the average amount of time that the various people are occupying it, and
About 6 months.
6 months.
6 months?
Yeah. And then most recently, what Keisha mentioned was that we had this 1 year program, which is the first time we've ever had a human being up there. Almost a year. Anyway, so at that point in time, Mr. LaRouche said, okay, once you've developed that, once you've developed a comfortability with your nearby neighborhood, your neighbor, which is the moon, then you have the capability to go to Mars, go further. Once you have an experience in developing space infrastructure, then you can go on to Mars and so on. And you don't want to send people one way to Mars and have them die there.
God bless you.
So now I just wanted to give you a little perspective. There's actually a lot more to say. The biggest thing that we need to do, our role here, is we have to get people to become less cowards, become non-cowards. What's the opposite of cowards?
Courageous.
Courageous. Right. We have to be courageous. We have to get people to be courageous. We've spoken to a lot of scientists. Do you think scientists know, the science? They know how to, rocket scientists know how to build rockets and so on. But you would think those people would be determining what should happen with, for example, the space program. You know who determines what happens with the space program?
Bean counters.
Yeah, the bean counters, you can say that, yes. The accountants, right? The accountants which know nothing about space or what's going to happen in the next 50 years. Yeah, they don't care. Yeah, exactly. It's not their job. And so part of it is that we have to get people who are competent to be determining policy. People who know where we should be in next 50 years to determine policy. And, there's a big fight around that because they have been suppressed and jailed and kicked out of work and so on for doing anything that is, for speaking up at all. But that's why we're here, because we do speak up and give them that type of courage to do that. But the other aspect of it is that we are national and international. And so for people who haven't seen this conference that Keisha mentioned on the 7th, that's a good place to see, to get a sense of the effect of this movement internationally and globally, and to get a sense of what we are pulling people into. What is the what type of force can we pull people into so that they're not just individuals out there duking it out, getting lost in the newspapers. Yeah. Anyway, that's where I want to stop. I want to have some amount of discussion. Yeah.
You mentioned the 3 other things past our solar system. Could you remind us what they are? So you were referring to the orbiter that's going around the moon that the Chinese have sent up that is not being wasted, still recording, it's being sent into outer space, right? Along with, you mentioned 3 other vehicles. Can you mention what they are?
The 2 are the Voyagers.
The Voyager 1 and 2.
Voyager 1 and 2 are out there past the Helios pause now. Actually, there's more than that. There's a 4th one. Then there's New Horizons, which went past Pluto.
Past the solar system?
I don't know if it's past. I don't think it is yet past.
Okay.
But it will eventually, and it's not slowing down. Yeah. IBEX.
What is it called?
I think there's another one called IBEX.
Ah. That's American?
That's American.
Uh-huh.
There's only a very few things that we've sent out.
So the orbiter that was going around for the moon, that would be from the 2nd phase of the Chinese program?
Oh no, that was the first phase.
Oh, that's the first phase.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know? So it took photos of the asteroids.
Yeah, the ones that you saw, those photos.
Right. So next year, the 3rd phase is actually retrieving samples and bringing them back to Earth, right? So when are they sending a man to land on Moon?
So far, right now, I think in the 2020s.
Could you repeat the answer?
In the 2020s, they haven't declared anything yet.
Oh, they have. Oh, they actually haven't announced when they're sending a man. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh.
No, they're pretty. They only declare what they're going to. They've got plans for.
Okay.
But that's why I pointed out the footsteps, because they're not gonna. They haven't said that, but they very much declared it right at the beginning.
Okay, so the female astronaut that went up and shared her outer space experience with all these, I think it was millions of school
6
children.
million, yeah.
Yeah, was a real heroine,
60
right?
million? I forget, yeah.
She was doing what?
She was on their space station.
Okay, so that was on their space station.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't go through that, but
Yeah.
they're building a space station. Their 2nd space station will be up and finished by 2022.
Oh, they're gonna have a second.
Well, they're going to replace the first one.
Oh, okay.
So the first one is a test one, and they'll replace it with a space station right around the time. So this giant space station I told you about, what we were talking about, this ISS, that one is supposed to come down, I guess, burn up in the atmosphere. So we were burn it up in 2024.
When was it put up there?
90 or 2. I actually don't know. Maybe, do you know? I don't know.
Replace the year.
Do you know, Joel?
When it was put up in 1999.
Okay.
The first part.
The first part, yeah.
Pieces.
So there was plans to have it, right now is plans to have it basically retire by 2024.
So then the only space station will be the Chinese.
Which we're not allowed to work with.
All righty.
Yeah.
Ah.
What's the biggest difference you see between like our Space Pioneer program and the Chinese Pioneer program? Because we started out with trying to figure out how to build all these processes and how to actually get all the steps done to get things done. Are the Chinese just like looking at what we did, or they're just starting from scratch?
That's a really good question. So they had a big boost because they didn't start until much later. And their manned space program is largely with a lot of help from Russia. So Russia has by far the most experience with manned space. Even before us, they had a space station with people up that before we started sending people to the moon and others. So they've had a lot of experience, and they were very glad they brought Chinese scientists in and trained them on deck and so on. So there's that aspect of it. And then the other ones are funny because they come from the United States. And so their missile program, so their rocket program, was headed up by a scientist who worked at the Pentagon and who was kicked out during the McCarthy era because he was a spy, because he wanted to go visit his parents in China.
Communist China.
Communist China. So he was a spy, and so they sent him away. And he started up their rocket program.
That's pretty cool.
But not with the technology we already had or something,
right,
but simply just from the that sense that we're going to solve this problem and we can do it.
Huh.
And then their lunar program is actually largely driven by a man who was inspired by Apollo. So he received a rock, which we had retrieved from the moon on the last Apollo mission, and he was supposed to analyze it. And so they analyzed it. He found that there was helium-3 in it, and found that you could, this would be very valuable for fusion and other things. And so, yeah, they have a lot of, not any of it is a direct replica of either Russia or China, Russia or the United States. But they definitely have experience. They know the things that we did wrong, for example. They've been very meticulous with it so that they don't run into the catastrophes we had.
They've done their homework.
They've done their homework, yeah. But a lot of people have described to me that it's totally new. The people in the programs are in their 20s. The leaders are in their 20s and 30s because it's so new. And so on. These are not, it's not the people, the China that people complain about, that they just take our stuff and copy it or something like that. It's not at all like that.
The indications of the far side of the moon and the importance of that unique breakthrough and unique discovery is indication of that, that it's not just a copycat thing, because we actually had an intention to do that, to go to the far side of the moon with our U.S. space program, but that was canceled because of the beam counters, as you call them, and everything else. But that's interesting.
What's up?
You mentioned that they had found from samples brought back from the moon that they had found evidence of a supernova.
Yeah.
What kind of evidence would be in rocks from the moon?
Supposedly an abundance of a particular isotope. I don't know.
Iron 60.
Okay.
Iron.
So radioactive iron.
Oh, okay.
Iron 60.
That comes from the supernova. That was redundancy.
Yeah, I didn't read it.
Remnants from the supernova that might have hit the moon?
No, it's the particles from that nova.
So mostly likely gamma rays or cosmic rays?
No, the actual iron from the nova.
Oh!
It's spread out all over the universe. It is collected by the
They
moon.
said it on moon, huh? Settled on moon.
Wow. That seems a long way for a particular matter to go.
Yeah.
It has a half-life of 2 million years, so they can tell how old it is. About that's left.
So they can tell us that it's been within a few million years ago.
Right.
I like to visualize the timeline here. So Apollo 17 was the last time we had a man on the moon, is that correct? That would be 1972, but the last time we had a vehicle was 1976.
That was Russian. Man,
Oh, it was the Russians that had a vehicle.
it failed.
Yeah,
I don't think it had.
okay. Okay, but the amazing thing is that the last time we had a man on the moon, which is amazing, and it still will be amazing again, was 1972. I mean, it's like, we started getting used to it maybe, I don't know, even at that time, but this huge gap.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Not having any man on the moon since 1972.
Yeah.
Wow.
Have, even though we're not supposed to, as governments, work with Russia or China, are individual scientists and astronauts calling up and saying, hey, that's really cool, y'all are doing X, Y, and Z? Are they allowed to?
All the independent companies can.
Pardon me?
All the independent companies.
Independent, if I'm whoever astronaut,
Yeah.
I can't call it so-and-so astronaut or whatever you call it.
If you're working for NASA or for a government organization,
In Russia, you can.
you're banned from.
Taikonaut.
So
It's Taikonaut.
it's against the law for an individual astronaut American to call a cosmonaut and say, I hear you guys are doing this.
It's against the law for NASA at all to collaborate and give sensitive information to the Chinese.
And the Chinese, I guess, can't say, oh yeah, we did this cool thing, so,
Yeah,
So-
like,
or-
there
So
was
is
somebody-
anybody stepping up to change those laws? Any
We have.
well, I know,
Yeah,
but any other, like, as far as,
I'm definitely trying to get some people to stand up and say this is BS.
anybody that's well known, like, really just,
Within the political, you
Within
mean,
the-
in office, right?
yeah, within the,
Well, the
somebody in
people,
the house at least.
the people who are in the political arena, they listen to us.
Yeah.
And so but right now, no. And the one thing I would say is the person who actually is supporting that insane law to have the United States not work with, China, is Congressman Culberson here in Houston, Texas.
You're a congressman.
Yeah, so it's not far from here. We can go and
Give them a call.
confront him, because
Yeah.
that's what they're supposed to do, is listen to the constituents. The last person who actually
Was my
developed the
congressman.
law was Frank Wolf
Frank
of
Wolf, yeah.
Wisconsin, Virginia.
Virginia, yeah. And he is gone. Okay.
Yeah. He's gone.
Well, we can only get rid of Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So maybe we need to go make a visit to Culberson.
I think that's a good idea.
I think so.
Yeah, because it's really, it's just absurd.
That might be that his Congress.
At this point, we have more to learn from them.
I mean, no, but it was really interesting. I mean, I find it really interesting. If you go back and look at the originals, guys who went into space and how long they had to recover for the short amount of time they spent in space versus they spent a year in space. The amount of recovery was like 2 days. I mean, he was out and about within a couple of days after they poked and pried him and stuck him in. So it was out and about eating, walking. And before it was like these guys could even. I mean, I think part of it was
They had
because.
bends.
Yeah, well, yeah, they put him on decompression chambers and other stuff, and then you have this guy would just come down. And it was like a long trip outside the U.S. I mean, it was.
Oh, yeah.
Just got back from my overseas work job. It's just funny.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it is a big breakthrough. We'll see how much we get out of it, because they're going to continue to test it and so on.
Has China announced anything besides a space station and a lunar program in terms of what it plans to do for longer term future?
No, I don't know. It might have, I didn't.
That's a good Mars with
But not to go to Mars.
a robotic lander.
Robotic lander on
yeah,
Mars. Huh?
I did hear that.
Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they don't have quite as extensive of a extra lunar, I don't know how you call it, past lunar program as we do. We have like we have Jupiter mission, Venus mission, Saturn mission, so they're not quite as developed yet.
They're getting there.
But
Quickly.
they are, yeah, the direction is definitely very quick. I mean, they have a lot to learn from us. The thing is that if the U.S. dropped its BS at this point and joined the community and made this shift, it would be incredible. One, this shift would occur at all. We wouldn't be constantly on the brink of killing all life on the planet. But then the other thing is applying the culture, the U.S. culture, right? Not as the nation that was the first to create a country on the idea that human creativity determines the laws. Facilitating human creativity is what determines the laws. That, if we brought that part of our nation into this whole process, that would be officially the new paradigm. Right now we're sort of, on that ledge, to fall one direction or the other. But we determine that, which direction that is. I want to show you something. You see that? No.
Where there is no vision, the people perish.
People know where this is from?
Well, it says Proverbs.
Bible.
Yeah. This is actually etched on the wall of the House Committee on Space Science and Technology.
Oh, wow.
Ah.
Cool.
Let's remind them.
So when you go to a hearing, they're all sitting right around here, right below here,
Oh,
With their backs to it,
really?
right?
with their backs to it.
With
Yes.
their backs to it.
Wait, what?
It needs a good polish. I think that they haven't seen it in a while.
Good.
What room would that be called then, where those hearings are held?
It's called the committee room for the Space Science and Technology
Okay.
Subcommittee.
Overson sitting in the middle there.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a
Oh, I think it
really
might be.
good saying.
Especially for
You
such
turn
a
it on.
program.
Who took the photo? Did you take it? Cool.
I'll take a better one next time. Yes.
Yeah, do, and then we can actually frame it.
Yeah.
That make a sharper image, yeah.
Leona and I went to a event yesterday, which was for the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and it was a talk, a luncheon on one of the space pioneers who was a collaborator with von Braun, who many people know, and what they were talking about, basically the significance of what they were discussing is that this person was one of the people who came over, the German space pioneers, as part of the development of what became the Apollo mission, the space program, and so forth. And he developed. I think the thing I wanted to bring out about it though is, there were a few people in the room, and the guy who was talking about this space pioneer, his name is Eugene Sanger, I think it's Sanger, and you find that the way that he was a collaborator in the same area, contemporary, I guess you would say, with Kraft Erica, who who Leona was talking about. Anyway, so what we saw from the standpoint of what these guys have contributed is that they're visionary leaders. They actually have an idea about what they're creating for the future. And we were getting that across to the people who were participating there and saying that that's what's been lost in the space program, is that everything's been taken over now by non-visionaries who are looking into the future in terms of long-term, what's the next 25 to 50-year missions, what's the generational mission, to just like, oh, how can we use the space program to get rich quick or make money fast, And a lot of, we had a discussion, a long meeting with one of these engineers of the space program, who said, yeah, most of the space program right now, in terms of the commercial flight, commercial industry, and so forth, they're looking at what are the returns you can get in 2 to 3 years, rapid money-making returns. And it's just amazing how you see these people talking about how we're going to have tourist attractions on the moon and get to Mars and have a mall and get to have sex on the moon and boob jobs, and it's just completely insane. But
well, there's people who even buy so-called shares on specific asteroids and stuff like that.
Wow.
But the funny thing is, there's still a treaty like between countries right now where no country can make money out of the space program, and that's a treaty that goes back from the very beginning, that like Russia can't make money from mining the moon or something like that. So even if we go to make go mine the moon, we have to make new international treaties to figure out how we're going to do that. Because right now everything that's outside the Earth is neutral, so for everybody. So again, we'd have to have even more collaboration to figure out how we're going to jointly develop the moon, how to jointly mine it and stuff like that. Which these people aren't doing; they're just bonkers.
Yeah, and some of them know that that's what has to be done, and that's why, the cultural aspect of it is so important too, in terms of getting people to realize that, the scientific community and the people who are running policy has to understand this is not just about their personal losses. We're talking about a loss to the nation if we don't accomplish these goals, the loss to the progress of mankind. And they don't, they have to actually see that. It's not a thing about, oh, if I speak out, as Leona was saying, is that going to mean I'm going to lose my benefits, my perks, and all of this kind of stuff. And, that's not what the space program is for.
No,
It's a space program.
I have this section out of this book called The Rocket Men, and it's the first page actually, and it says, in 1969, a few months after Apollo 11 landed on the moon, Rhode Island Senator John Pastore was interrogating Fermilab physicist Robert Wilson at a Senate hearing on whether the federal government should spend $250 million to build a new collider. The senator wanted to know, would this collider add to the security of the country? No, sir, I don't believe so. Wilson answered. Senator Pastore, nothing at all. Mr. Wilson, nothing at all. Senator Pastore, it has no value in that respect. Mr. Wilson, it only has to do with the respect. It only has to do with the respect with which we regard one another, the dignity of man, our love of culture. It has to do with, are we good painters, good sculptors, great poets? I mean, all the things we really venerate in our country and are patriotic about. It has nothing to do directly with defending our country, except to make it worth defending.
Exactly. Collider, you're using the word collider at that time?
Collider.
What was a collider?
I don't know.
A club.
Accelerates subatomic particles.
Oh, it collides subatomic particles.
I thought that was something that was going on in this century, not.
No, it's a new one. Yeah.
You know, in Texas.
Oh,
started
Fermi
building-
Lab,
That was a silver
Yeah.
line.
that's what they do.
Oh, okay.
There's been several.
There you go, that's it. Exactly.